Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new series.
A brand new series?
Yeah.
Ooh, exciting.
It's a book review series, and for our first book review, we are doing the Torah.
The whole thing.
The whole Torah.
Yep.
Now, if you've been keeping up with Atheist Sunday School, you would know that we recently finished the Torah.
It only took us a year.
Only took us a year. So what I have here is a list of key events
Yes.
in the Torah, broken down by book, and then we have some Bibles here, as we usually do.
We've got 4 of them.
Yes, we do. 4 Bibles. And also our regular companions, an Old Testament survey from the New Interpreter's Bible, and the Oxford Companion to the Bible.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have all those things here with us. So I guess let's get started with the first book of the Torah,
Genesis.
Genesis.
Now, Genesis is a book about creation and the downfall of man towards a life of sin. And it has a number of stories in it, actually. Many more stories than some of the other books in the Torah.
Yeah, it's definitely a much more mythological account. The way that it was written is they were just trying to give a mythological reason for the hardships that Israel and then later Judah were suffering. So it was written to be more mythological. I don't think it was meant to be read literally.
No, I don't think it was meant to be read literally. Like, it starts, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And that doesn't really mean anything if you think about it literally.
It's just a generic creation story.
Right.
And the thing is, it's vague, first of all, and when we get later into the narrative, it has clear parallels to things in Kings, and we'll get to that when we come to it.
I mean, it doesn't read like a scientific article.
Well, no, not even a little.
Not even a little.
Yeah. So the first thing that we need to talk about, obviously, is creation.
Creation.
Yeah.
That's correct, which is covered in Genesis 1
and then 2. Yep. And although those also kind of include Adam and Eve.
Yes.
So there are 2 creation stories. There is one from J and one from P.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the way that they explained this to us in Sunday school was that one was a summary of the other. But that doesn't really add up.
The order of events is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that happens on the first day in chapter 1, we have the creation of the heavens and the earth, and then light and darkness. Then we have, the waters expanded, called the expanse heaven. So that was really the creation of heaven, I guess.
That's right.
And then land, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, called so it was land and then sea, basically. And then we have plant life.
But there was already water.
Yeah, there was already water.
Right.
He just called it the sea.
Right.
And then we have the plant life, along with, fruits and stuff like that. And this is where they use the word kind a bunch.
Right.
Yeah.
And the order is different. In Genesis 2, they create the earth and heaven, and then it says, no shrub of the field was yet in the earth, for the Lord had not caused it to rain. So he creates a mist, right? Because there was no water yet at this point, and he causes a mist to come up and bring water to the ground. which is different than the account that they give in Genesis 1 already.
Yeah, because there are two different authors to these stories.
Right.
Or I think it demonstrates it pretty easily.
Well, it's likely two different authors to these stories.
Yeah. And then on the next day, he created the stars. That's what that looks like. And he also created the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. So the sun and the moon. And then we have the creatures. And then finally, we have man. No, we have beasts, right? We have sea life and birds. But then we have all the other land walking creatures.
Right, and in Genesis 2, it goes water, and then man, and then he plants a garden, so then plants, and then beasts and fowl.
Okay. Yeah, so different accounts.
Right.
Different orders of creation.
And here, man and woman in Genesis 2 happen separately, whereas in Genesis 1...
He created man and woman, yeah.
He created man and woman.
Yeah. So then we can cover the fall. So obviously, this has been kind of engraved in our minds through all of, popular media.
Right.
Obviously, the serpent tricks Eve into eating this fruit, the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
And there are two great trees, the tree of life, which grants eternal life, and the fruit of the knowledge of true and evil, good and evil, which comes from that tree. And specifically, the good and evil tree, they are instructed not to eat from. But naturally, being human beings...
And being presumably children...
Yeah.
Because they were literally born yesterday.
Yeah. Naturally, they went and ate the fruit.
Yeah.
Or were tricked into it by the snake.
Right. And even if this did happen, the fault would not be on Adam and Eve. The fault would be on the snake.
Right. And,
although it wasn't a snake, just serpent, but either way.
Well, that's correct. And God actually says, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord sent him forth from the Garden of Eden. So here, we haven't brought this up yet, but from the beginning of the Torah, it uses polytheistic language. All of it says, let us do this.
Let us make them in our image.
Let us make them in our image. That's correct.
Genesis 1:26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have domination over the fish of the sea, over the birds, yada yada yada."
Yes, that's correct. And they use this us narrative in every single translation that I've ever seen.
Me too. Now, the interesting thing is the word that is used for God this early on can be either plural or singular.
That's right.
So it perfectly makes sense. You could have this entire story be with just one God.
You easily could.
But the language suggests that people would have read it and interpreted it as multiple gods.
That's right.
Because while the word for God itself could be one way or the other, the context shows that, yes, multiple gods.
Yes. So Christianity, Judaism, all the Abrahamic religions, they all are polytheistic from the beginning.
They all started out that way.
Yes.
As the religions evolved, they became monotheistic.
That's correct.
Yeah, so they went from actually polytheism, at least when we're talking about ancient Israel, they went from being polytheistic to henotheistic, in which one god is valued above all other gods, and it pretty much exclusively worshipped. And then it became monotheistic.
That's right. And
That took centuries.
right.
So.
This Adam and Eve story lasts from chapter 2 through chapter 4, when they have their kids, and the Cain and Abel story is covered in chapter 4.
Yeah, and I love the Cain and Abel story.
You do. You even have the mark of Cain.
I even have the mark of Cain that I can't really show this. It's very difficult to bend my skin that way.
Yes.
Whatever, you probably can't even see it. I'll put up a fucking picture. Obviously, the two children, Cain and Abel, they're born. They have a bit of a spat.
Yes.
God likes Abel more. So Cain kills Abel.
That's right.
Yeah.
As you do.
Yes, as you do.
If God likes your brother more than you.
And now, what I do love about this is when God asks about where Abel is, Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?"
It's a good line.
Yeah.
And Lamech later on,
Yes, Lamech.
in the same chapter even, he was the first one who took 2 wives, and he killed someone. He killed multiple people, and he's like, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold, because he's killed more people than Cain.
Yeah.
And God gave Cain this mark, which says that if anyone tries to kill him because he's a murderer, that they will be punished sevenfold.
Yeah. So it is a mark of protection, but at the same time, it is a curse.
Right.
Because people will know that you're a murderer, and they won't let you into their communities or anything. And also, Cain couldn't grow anything. He lost his green thumb, so he had to go off and build his own cities, basically.
And it's only after Cain and Abel that people began to worship, according to this story. At the end of chapter 4, it says, so Adam and Eve had another son after Abel died, who was named Seth. And it says, and to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord, which should basically mean to worship or to partake in religious activities.
Yeah.
And so it only takes 2 generations for humanity to
worship this God.
Yeah, only 2 generations.
And obviously they are acknowledging the existence of other people, because we literally go from just this tiny family, from the first man and woman, to being outside of the garden, them going into other communities with other people.
Right, well, Lamech's wives are not mentioned in Adam and Eve's lineage at all.
So obviously they are acknowledging that other people exist. It could not just be them.
Right.
All right, next we have the flood story.
The flood story, which lasts from...
Pretty much the middle, from let's just say chapter 6 through 9.
Yeah, 6 through 9. And my favorite line in the Old Testament is right here, which is chapter 6:6. And it repented the Lord that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. What does yours say?
I have, and the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart.
Which demonstrates that God is not all-knowing, because an all-knowing being would not do something and then regret it.
Yes. Also, he does ask questions.
Right.
Like in chapter 1, he asked Adam, "Where are you?"
And with Cain and Abel, he asks where Abel is.
Yeah. So the issue between these different authors is that in one narrative, God is seen as more anthropomorphic, more human-like, and in the other, he is more cosmic, more divine, really shoving that whole all-powerful shit in your face.
Yeah. And with these stories, they cover Noah. Now, Noah makes a boat, and he puts a bunch, not just two, right? It's more than two of each.
In the story, it's like two of each plus two of each unclean animal, and 7 of each clean animal, which means fit for sacrifice. You can sacrifice the clean animals.
Right. So
I actually have a video on this if you haven't seen it yet, A Tale of Two Floods. It's an in-depth look at the 2 flood stories in the Bible.
yes, I would definitely suggest looking at that video if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, so I'm not going to rehash it, but there are 2 authors. There are many doublets, so many repetitions, like they get on the ark twice. The animals get on the ark twice. God tells Noah about the flood twice.
Yeah.
Almost a dozen things happen twice. You also have the different views on God, the different language. But it's all in that video. I go over the evidence for that.
So basically, God wipes out all life on Earth except everyone that's in that boat by flooding the
So
entire
that's
planet.
8 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And he specifically does say all of creation.
yeah. Well, after 6:6, it says, and the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing and fowl of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them.
Yeah. So that's all that he's created.
Yeah, everything.
So,
all life.
yeah, that's that.
He doesn't mention the plants.
Yeah, because
And, well, I think that's because of the ancient view that plants
we're not alive.
alive, right?
Yeah.
Which obviously is false. But he mentions creating the plants. Now, is the implication here maybe that they didn't know that drowning the plants would kill them? Maybe. But an all-knowing God certainly would know that.
Yeah.
So after the flood, human civilization comes back together. They have made this city called Babel, and they're building a tower that can go up into the heavens.
Although it wasn't called Babel yet. It was only called Babel after the tower is destroyed.
Right. Here, it doesn't make any reference. They just say, come, let's make brick and burn them thoroughly. And let's build a city and a tower with its top in the heaven. And God punishes them by removing their ability to communicate. He says, they are one people and they all have one language. This is what they begin to do. Now nothing will be withholden from them, which they propose to do. Come, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So this is obviously some kind of early attempt to explain away the fact that other people speak different languages than you do.
Yeah. And like if we're talking about the context of the narrative, you would have supposedly come from one place.
Right.
Which would make no sense. Why would your language diverge that much?
It wouldn't.
Yeah. So
well, I mean, over time, obviously,
right.
it does.
Right, but over just a few generations?
Yeah, this was not enough time.
Yeah.
There were not enough people around. There was just Noah and his family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they presumably spoke the same language.
Hopefully.
Yeah. All right, so next we have Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah,
Yeah,
where
that's the next big thing.
where we finally have Abraham. Abraham is the first of God's prophets. I mean, God was around before then. He talked to Noah. Right?
Yeah.
But Abraham is specifically a prophet, meant to bring the word of God to the people. And Abraham argues with God over Sodom and Gomorrah. So even within this tradition, they would encourage arguing with divine beings. So if it was an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-benevolent being, there would be no purpose in arguing with it.
You know what I just thought of? So if someone were to take this account literally,
Yeah.
then then our morality would not have come from God, because if we're disagreeing with God on morality and are able to persuade him otherwise, then he is not the originator of it.
Yeah, he's obviously not a moral arbiter because he makes a decision and is persuaded otherwise.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he sticks with his original conviction after meeting a few people in Sodom and Gomorrah. We actually only really hear about the Sodom account.
Yeah. Gomorrah is really kind of a throwaway thing. Like, there's really not much about it other than it was the place of evil, basically.
And both of these places were completely destroyed. Lot escapes.
With his daughters?
With his daughters, not his wife. His wife turns into a pillar of salt because she disobeyed the Lord by looking back at the city while escaping. And Lot escapes. Lot was a relative of Abraham's. They had separated earlier on in the story. And so his daughters rape him after getting him drunk.
Yep.
Because they're living in a cave and they don't see any other opportunity to procreate.
Which is, that's what you do.
Which is really just a throwaway story in here. They don't get punished for it. Nothing happens because of it. They just mention that it happens.
Yeah. And both of them, like, on different days.
Both of them on different days. So
now it does go somewhere, at least looking at it from a historical perspective, because the section ends with the firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day.
Yep, and they were fought.
So that's their explanation of these different groups.
Right, and later on, we'll see in Deuteronomy that they had a big problem with them. It was not a fun time.
No, not at all.
So let's get on with this Isaac story. Abraham takes...
Yes, Abraham and Isaac. I'm going to go get alcohol for this one.
All right.
I'm back with alcohol.
All right. So Abraham had this son, not with his sister wife, but with her slave. And he goes on to kind of be the originator of the Muslim faith.
Yeah, or the in the case of this, it would be just the Arabs.
Right.
Yeah.
But
they weren't that far, because the Negev, or the southern region, was not really that far.
So Sarah, Abraham's wife, basically has Abraham kick them out into the curbside, basically. And so they're gone. Now Sarah has this kid whose name is Isaac.
Yes.
And God commands that he bind up Isaac and offer him as a sacrifice. So,
yeah, because that's what you do when you're an all-loving God.
Right. So Abraham lies to everyone and lies to Isaac and says that God will provide a sacrifice for them.
Lying is a sin, Abraham.
Lying is a sin. So Abraham takes his son, he ties him up, he's ready to kill him, and then all of a sudden, angel comes down, Deus Ex Machina.
And then, no, he doesn't have to kill him anymore. I was just testing your faith.
Yep.
He instead ends up sacrificing a lamb, right?
Yep. He ends up sacrificing a lamb. The Lord did provide, so he didn't lie.
Yeah.
Wasn't a sin, I guess.
The lamb thing, I mean, there's a reason why Jesus is called the Lamb of God. Mm-hmm. Is because it's this other sacrifice that you can make.
Yeah.
So it's clear parallels and clear callbacks to this early tradition.
Right.
So to me, that just shouts not fucking real. But because that's not how real life works. That's how fiction works.
Right, that is how fiction works. It builds off of a story.
Yeah.
But Isaac never speaks to Abraham again after this. I mean, they all get circumcised. Yeah. Obviously, because Abraham makes this covenant with God.
Yeah, and everyone in the house has to be circumcised.
Everybody gets circumcised as part of this eternal covenant. and whoever gets born after that also gets circumcised. Just
Yeah.
males. Just males. And with that circumcision, they get the promise that they will be as bountiful as the stars in the sky.
Yeah. But that didn't come to fruition until much, much, much later.
Yeah, this does not happen for Abraham, but it, I guess, happens for his descendants.
Yeah.
And Isaac never speaks to Abraham again. Isaac goes on to have kids.
Yes, his kids, Jacob and Esau. Now this is kind of a story of brotherly love and hatred.
That's correct.
It's one is literally meant to be Israel, that's Jacob, and one is meant to be Judah. And Judah, or Esau, the tribe of Edom, always gets fucked over. And it is clearly represented in the narrative.
So Esau is starving. He's been out working, and Jacob is like, here, I'll give you some food. But first, you have to swear your birthright to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because Esau was the firstborn. And Esau's like, well, I guess, because if I don't, I'm going to starve to death.
Yeah.
Right? And this is in
Gotta pick your battles.
Genesis 25. Now from here, they basically have all sorts of clashes between each other. And Jacob retreats. He runs away. And he meets these girls, Rachel and Leah, and they're twins. Rachel and Leah have a father named Laban. And he has Jacob work for him for a number of years, and then he gets to marry his two daughters. First he gets the one that he didn't want, and then he has to work for a longer time, and then he gets the one that he does want. So then, after Jacob gets married, takes all of Laban's good animals, he leaves and decides to go back to his hometown. He's afraid that Esau is going to kill him. So he sends people out to deal with them, and not to deal with them, but to make sure things are okay. And eventually Esau's like, hey dude, it's all good. Don't worry about any of that. Jacob also wrestles with God.
Yeah, it was in Bethel, right? Or right outside of Bethel?
So Jacob builds this altar, and he calls it El Bethel, because that's where God told him to go, and God is El, which is one of the names of...
It's the name of a Canaanite god.
Right, it's the name of a Canaanite god.
Yeah, although later it just became pretty much synonymous with... It just became a title, just like Lord.
Mm-hmm. And at Bethel, he wrestles with God, and God renames him Israel.
Yeah, that's where he gets his name.
Mm-hmm. And that's obviously where the people of Israel get their name, because Jacob...
Yeah, and Israel means he strives with God.
Yes. Now Jacob has tons of kids, and that's why they're the children of Israel. But one of those kids is Joseph, with his Technicolor dream coat.
Yeah.
Yes. So Joseph...
has a lot of visions.
He's a dreamer. He gets magic visions from God of the future through dreams, and he can interpret dreams.
Yeah. And in fact, that skill really helped him out when his brothers decided to sell him into slavery.
That's right. His brothers, they see that their father likes him more than them, so they trap him in this pit.
Because they don't want to kill him.
Because they don't want to kill him. And then they're planning on just letting him starve to death. But one of his other brothers comes in, Reuben, and he helps him out of the pit, sells him into slavery. So Joseph goes down to Egypt as a slave and becomes imprisoned. One day, he's sitting around, being a slave imprisoned, and some people need some dreams interpreted. So Joseph uses his talents to interpret their dreams, and he makes correct interpretations. And years later, one of them remembers it because the other one died. One of them remembers it, mentions it to the Pharaoh, and then Joseph not only gets out of being a slave and a prisoner,
He becomes like a high official.
he becomes a high official.
An advisor, right?
He's basically in charge of Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he then later he prophesizes a drought,
Mm-hmm.
and he tells people to store up a bunch of grain.
Mm-hmm.
Then they follow this, and all of Egypt is fine, but then other nations are affected by this drought,
Right,
so
which
they
causes their family to reunite.
Mhm.
And at first, he's kind of reticent to work with them. He trolls them a little bit. But eventually everything works out all right, and that's how Genesis ends. So, thoughts about Genesis?
Thoughts about Genesis? Well, it's clearly mythological.
Clearly mythological.
Since there are so many repetitions of things, differences in the names of God, we can reasonably conclude that it had multiple authors. It was written after the actual... It was written after Deuteronomy and the exile, because when it talks about Jacob and Esau, it's clear parallels. It's clearly meant to be metaphor.
Right, and
About
there's
Israel
a lot of good metaphor in Genesis.
Yeah.
Genesis has some decent stories.
Now, what I don't get is why anybody would take this literally.
Well, there's no reason to take it literally. It's decent fiction, right? The Cain and Abel story, that's a classic,
It's a classic.
right? And the Adam and Eve story is a very good one. It tells you that there are consequences to your actions. It teaches some good things to children, a lot of bad things, but some good things. Things really start getting bad later on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Genesis is probably the best of the 5 books of the Torah.
Yeah, the other ones just get... there's a lot of killing that isn't really discussed,
Yeah.
like in general terms, in any debate. Some of it is, like, obviously the flood was just a big fucking mass destruction.
Right.
But that's really the only big one. Oh, I guess Sodom and Gomorrah too.
Yeah.
But there are a lot more in other books that people don't talk about.
That's right. And that's because I think most people have only read Genesis.
Yeah, because it gets so boring at a point. Like, you read through, like, the first few chapters, and it's like, okay, here's the story. It's kind of engaging.
Right. But there's so much repetition, and things are phrased so poorly.
Yeah, and
Like-
weird genealogy breaks, and...
Right. And it's not, like, poetic either.
Yeah.
Some Bibles go out of their way to arrange things kind of poetically. I think yours does over there, the new
Oh, the New King James?
New King James or the English Standard Version.
Yeah, sometimes it arranges things poetically.
Sometimes it arranges things poetically, but most of the time it reads like prose. And it's not good prose. Like, there's some good ideas that are in Genesis, but it's not well written. It's clearly jumbled up between multiple authors.
Yeah, but it does. I'll give it this. It has good metaphor.
It has good metaphor. I would probably rate Genesis on a 5-point scale, probably a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I'll do that. Like 3 out of 5, maybe 3.5 out of 5.
Maybe 3.5. That's fair. You know, it's a decent story. It doesn't teach all of the horrific morals. Actually, there's some good stuff. You should argue with your social superiors, for example, with Abraham. And, like, the lying thing. Abraham gets in trouble for lying about his sister wife being not his wife, but just being his sister.
He's like, I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole truth.
Yeah. So it gives reason not to do that through some colorful storytelling.
Yeah.
So there's some decent stuff in there. There's actually some decent morals in there. It's not all garbage. The real bad stuff starts to happen with Moses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get into that.
We'll get into that. So, second book of the Bible, of the Torah, is Exodus. And this is where shit starts to get crazy.
Yeah, and people know about Exodus because, obviously, the Exodus.
The Exodus.
Very important.
Yes.
Big event. Everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of stuff that is overlooked often.
Yeah. And so there's this population issue.
So I just want to bring this up first. The first main point to bring up about Exodus is that this was the first book that was about their national hero Moses.
Their national hero. Yes. This is about Moses.
Yeah, kind of like a King Arthur type character.
Right, who is the purported author of the 5 books of Moses, what we're reviewing, the Torah.
Yeah.
So there's this issue. So Joseph actually. Joseph was this official, and he obviously favored his family a lot and was very wealthy. And so there are issues between the descendants of Joseph and the other people of Egypt. Enough time has passed where people have forgotten about what Joseph did with helping them through that drought. And so they're basically standing against his descendants. So Pharaoh is like, hey, let's just have every son who's born killed, and things will be fine. Moses' mom is like, no way, and decides to put him in a basket. So he's literally a basket case starting off. And
Puts him in a river.
He gets put in the river.
And he goes like a little bit downriver.
A little bit downriver. Now, Pharaoh's daughter is on a boat in the river, sees the baby, grabs the baby. This is her baby now. And its name is Moses. And Moses is a hell of a guy. We'll be hearing about him for the rest of this video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The absolute rest of it.
Yeah. So Moses gets raised in Egyptian royalty. He has a very, very good life. But eventually he ends up killing a man who's...
Because the man was beating a Hebrew slave.
Yeah, the man was beating a Hebrew slave, and Moses didn't mean to kill the man. He just ended up killing him.
Yeah, and then buried him.
Now, since he was scared, he ran away. Ran off into the desert. And he has a good life. He's a shepherd. He has some kids, a family. And all that changes one day when...
He comes across the burning bush.
The burning bush.
Yeah.
What's the burning bush all about, Lawrence?
The burning bush is when God decides to talk to Moses through a bush. Mm-hmm. There's this bush in the desert, and it lights on fire, and Moses hears a voice talking through it. And this is actually where we learn the name of God for the first time, at least in this narrative. Moses asks God, when he goes back to the people, mm-hmm. who should he say sent him? God says, I am that I am.
I am that I am. And that's the name of God that we get, basically.
And people have been referencing him to him just as I am. And the thing is, in the New Testament, especially when we get to the Gospel of John, Jesus he has a plethora of I am sayings. Like, I am the truth, the way, the life. I am the Lamb of God, whatever. Mm-hmm. Or he even says the phrase, I am sent me. So this thing goes all the way through.
That's right. And after he meets with God, God's basically like, hey, go back to Egypt. You've got people suffering there in slavery. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, and Moses goes back and he's all like, let my people go.
Let my people go.
Yeah, but then Pharaoh doesn't let the people go. Now, it kind of jumps back between saying that Pharaoh decided on his own not to let the people go, mm-hmm. or God hardened his heart. So, depending on which time in the narrative, because the plagues start,
Yes.
and I forget the order of the plagues. I'm sure we can just.
Well, they
that.
turn the River Nile into blood. Then there's frogs.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what we got. The first plague, water turned to blood, and then frogs.
Then lice.
We got gnats, flies, Egyptian livestock dies, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and then the death of every firstborn child.
Yes. Every single firstborn child who is not protected by this special seal that they make,
Right.
which is painting their doors with
Lamb's blood.
Yeah. It demonstrates that they're a believer. So the angel of death comes down and passes over those houses.
Yeah, Passover.
And kills them, all those firstborn kids.
Yeah, and intermittently between all these plagues, we see sometimes Pharaoh's like, no, I will not let them go, and then other times God hardens Pharaoh's heart. So some of the times it was God's fault.
Right, sometimes it's God's fault, but eventually, after his son dies, Pharaoh's like, get out of here. And so they leave. Pharaoh changes his mind and starts chasing them.
Yeah.
And then we get to see Moses' big magic power.
Yeah.
Which is, he raises up his staff, the rod of God.
Rod of God. Get your Rod of God Valentine's Day t-shirts at teespring.com/Milwaukee Atheists.
Yep, get those.
Yeah.
And the waters of the Red Sea separate. And the people of Israel travel through. And once they're on the other side, and Pharaoh's army is coming in, it closes back up and all those people drown.
Yep.
So that's Moses's probably most well-known miracle, is parting the Red Sea.
Yeah, definitely. Parting the Red Sea is a big one.
Yes. After that...
After parting the Red Sea and eventually getting out away from Egypt, we get the first interesting narrative. It's about the first time he got water from the rock.
Yes, the first time he gets water from the rock.
Yeah.
Tell him about that.
So the first time that he got water, there's a second time that is in Numbers, I believe. And it's basically the same story, but they take place in two different areas, and two different things happen. So in this one, the people are thirsty, and God tells Moses to hit this rock, and he hits the rock, and water comes pouring out. We'll get to the second one later.
And the second one's more of a problem, right?
Yes.
That's gonna be an issue.
Yeah.
So after they get through all that, getting the water from the rock, they're traveling around, and they're like, all right, hold on. Moses says, I'm going to go up to the top of this mountain here.
Yeah, where he will be talking to God.
Yep.
And face to face, yeah.
Face to face. He talks to God, and he gets the 10 Commandments.
Yes, now this is the first set of the 10 Commandments.
The first set of the 10 Commandments.
Yeah. Now, I want to do a video on the 10 Commandments because they are all slightly different. And the way that they are structured, let's just pull it up here. So the first set of the 10, some of them are very simple and easy, like you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal. Very easy, very simple rules. But some of them, like here at 24, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Yada, yada, yada.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So the issue with that is the 10 Commandments have gone through redactions.
Yes.
They have a long history. I want to do a video on it. But basically there were additions, extrapolations on top of what was already there. So the first part was probably, you shall have no other gods before me. Fine. Now, when it talks about no other gods before me, Thomas Romer, in The Invention of God, a book that I recently finished, discusses that, pretty much makes the case that when it talks about no other gods before me, it literally means no other statues of other gods in front of my statue.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a statue of Yahweh in the temple, and there were supposed to be no other god statues. So it says no other gods before me, it means literally no other gods before this one.
Mm-hmm.
But later, as the ideas evolved, so did the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, and a lot of these are fine, like you said. Don't murder, don't steal, don't bear false witness. Now, what Nietzsche pointed out in his criticism was that when you get into coveting, you have no control over that.
Well, yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
It happens in the mind.
Right, which means that no matter what you do, you're a sinner due to human nature. And so you always must be subservient to the church. You always must make your sin donations, so you're always giving them food.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just a way that they exploited the people. So some of these commandments are very troublesome.
Yeah. But Moses comes down from Mount Sinai after talking to God face to face. And the people Aaron helps the people fashion a golden calf, because the people were afraid that Moses wouldn't come back. So Aaron is like, all right, everybody, calm down. Give me all the gold stuff. We'll melt it down, and we will fashion a golden calf for you to worship.
So before Moses has even come back down, they're already breaking the rules.
Yeah. And we actually do have more laws, obviously, other than the Ten Commandments. We have, laws about slaves.
Oh, yes.
I forgot about
laws
those.
about slaves.
Yeah.
Well, slavery is perfectly acceptable within this moral code.
Yeah, it is perfectly fine. It's okay to beat your slave as long as they don't die in a few days.
Yep.
And I think it comes later in the book, but...
There are also rules about selling your children into slavery.
Yeah, females cost less than males.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as is tradition. And... yeah, basically says it's totally fine to have slaves. Just, it tells you how to treat your slaves, how long you can enslave them, and then it gives you different rules for Hebrew slaves and non-Hebrew slaves.
Yep.
But Exodus 21, anything about slavery, because I've heard Christian apologists talk about this shit all the time, they're like, oh, no, it wasn't the same. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's the same. It's owning another human being.
Yeah.
So, let's put aside the bullshit.
Yes.
The Bible endorses slavery.
The Bible endorses slavery.
Sees
the Bible
nothing wrong with
endorses rape.
Yep.
At certain points. And murder.
Yeah, but you can't spill your seed. That's bad.
Yeah, you can't spill
God
your
will kill
seed.
you.
God will kill you.
Yeah.
So after he gets these commandments, he brings it down, he sees the calf, and Moses is pissed about it.
Yeah, and then he throws down the tablets that he just got from God, and he's like, damn, that's a bummer. But this is actually his first killing, I think. The golden calf narrative is actually very interesting, because what Aaron says to the people, he says pretty much, here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, which doesn't make any sense, because there's one calf, but the statement implies more than one. It's plural gods, and they didn't bring them out of the land of Egypt. And the other issue is that it parallels a story in 2 Kings about King Jeroboam building 2 golden calves. It makes a lot more sense in that story than it does in this one. So I think this golden calf story was, and he says almost identically the same words. Mm-hmm. So I think this golden calf story was meant to parallel the golden calf story in 2 Kings. So after the golden calf narrative, when Moses comes back and he drops the tablets with the commandments on them, he says, and hold on, what does he say here? And he said to them, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, put your sword on your side, each of you, and go to and fro from gate to gate throughout the camp, and each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor." Because he had just split up the people into people who thought they shouldn't be following Yahweh or the God of Moses, and people who thought they should. Mm-hmm. And then Moses commanded his followers to kill the people who disagreed with him.
That's right. And then they have all their commandments again.
Yep, and then he gets the new set of tablets.
Yep.
And this one is the only one where it says God wrote them with his finger. Mm-hmm. And if you want more information on that, you can look up my video, What Would Jesus Do? I talk about the pericope adultery. Jesus and the woman taken to adultery. But basically, the only person in the Bible to write, quote, with their finger is God, until Jesus does it also. Mm-hmm. And in that story, Jesus is meant to, like, in the story, it's meant to portray that Jesus is not only a giver or a prophet of the law, he is the arbiter of it.
That's right.
Yeah, it's meant to draw the connection to God.
Because they have the magic power of being able to write things with their finger and cause them to be.
Well,
I guess.
Yeah, that's one interpretation. Yeah. But either way, it's a direct parallel to the Moses tradition.
Yes, and after they get these commandments, they build the tabernacle, and it takes up a huge chunk of Exodus.
6 chapters.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And I would not recommend reading that section.
No, it is so fucking dry. Like, it is just like building a lampstand and building all the curtains and stuff and making an altar for burnt offerings and making the ark.
Yeah, and basically that's the rest of Exodus.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts about Exodus overall?
I think the traditions that it spawned were very interesting. Mm-hmm. I think that some of this stuff is, we can actually falsify this stuff. These are testable claims. And the most I can tell is they could have worshipped a golden calf at some point. But the way it's described in Exodus is not how it happened at all. No. Like, we could say, just because it wouldn't even matter, that Jeroboam actually did build 2 golden calves. Mm-hmm. Fine, whatever, not even a big deal.
Yeah.
May very well have happened. But this narrative did not happen. The way it's described, it's not history. But I think it did spawn some interesting things. Obviously, in our minds, burning bush, plagues, Exodus.
Yeah, the story is quite good until they get out of Egypt. Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I'd probably say the first half of Exodus is like a 4 out of 5.
But then the tabernacle? Oh.
No, it's just bad.
Oh.
Like, the entire second half, basically, of the entire book is just a pain to read. It's not worth it. Not worth it at all. I would say that's like a 0 out of 10 section.
Yeah, the tabernacle, like, I don't want to read about you building a lampstand.
So I'll give him like a 2 out of 5 for the whole book. That's my rating.
Yeah, because I think that's fair. I might give it a little higher because I do think some of the traditions are really neat. But the tabernacle thing, cut that shit out.
Yeah, no, there's no excuse. No reason to have that much detail. H.P. Lovecraft doesn't even talk about his architecture that much.
This was a ridiculous amount. It was very unnecessary.
Completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
So the third book of the Torah is Leviticus.
Yes, Leviticus. That's a fun one. Now this is basically, it consists of 2 things. A bunch of laws, mm-hmm. and the consecration of Aaron.
Yes.
Now, I just want to get the consecration of Aaron out of the way before we talk about the laws.
All right.
So, pretty much the only reason the consecration of Aaron is important is because up until that point, the author of most of this, P, the priestly author, he was against animal sacrifice unless it was for the priesthood. Because the way the author would have seen this is the only people that can pretty much connect, pretty much be a middleman for regular people and divinities and, God, is the priesthood. So the only people that could sacrifice to God were the priesthood. You had to bring your sacrifices to them, and they would do it for you, atone for your sins and whatnot. But in P's narrative, from how we can split it up, there is no animal sacrifice until the consecration of Aaron. Now people can sacrifice, because now there is an Aaronid priesthood.
Oh. Well, that's terrifying.
Because if you remember from the flood, in the narrative, there is an animal sacrifice at the end. But that was P's version. Sorry, that was J's version. J's version had the animal sacrifice because his animal sacrifices did not need a priesthood.
Yeah, and it's horrible because of the way that it's actually implemented within these laws.
Yeah.
Basically, Leviticus is a book for priests.
Yeah.
About how to screw the people. It gives specific rulings for offerings that people are supposed to give when they commit sins.
You have your peace offerings, your burnt offerings, sin offerings, grain offerings.
Wave offerings.
Yeah, wave offerings.
Yeah, and
guilt offerings, lots of different shit that you could do wrong.
Yeah, so many different offerings. They're all animal sacrifices. Every single one of them. Now
you also give other things too, but they at least include one animal.
Yeah, and God prefers the animals. God is not a vegetarian, as we saw with the Cain and Abel story.
Yeah.
So the priests then get to take a portion of all the food.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got an entire community of people.
It's like a sin tax.
It is a tax. Because here they do have currency.
Yeah.
Right. And they give options of people to replace their offerings with currency. Right? So no matter what, you are going to get something from the people. The entire book essentially is just how to tax people, and it's completely unfair. It makes no sense at all rationally.
Yeah. Because this isn't like the society. This isn't the society at large that they were living in. It was for the people who were. It was for like the rabbis, pretty much.
Yeah, and it seems like a very artificially placed book. It doesn't seem to fit in with the narrative at all between any of these books. Like this, Numbers at least makes sense.
Yeah, this isn't like a narrative thing. The only narrative piece is the consecration of Aaron.
Aaron dies in Numbers.
Yeah, Aaron dies in Numbers.
Aaron dies in Numbers, but
the only important part of Leviticus is some of the crazy laws, and it's pretty specific too.
It is pretty specific.
There's also the how to heal lepers.
How to heal lepers, which is
okay, so you kill a bird.
You kill a bird.
And you dip another bird into that bird's blood. And then you keep the leper in like a room for how long? Like a week or something?
Yeah, it's about a week or two. And
you just check up on them.
Yeah, if they're not better in a week, then come back in another week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's not very scientific.
No.
But after Leviticus, we get into Numbers.
Yeah. What do you think Leviticus as a whole?
What do I think of Leviticus as a whole? Leviticus is not a good book.
No,
I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. Exodus makes... Okay, Leviticus makes Exodus look like a great book. I would rate Leviticus 0 out of 10. I don't think that there's anything that's of relevance or use to anyone outside of biblical scholarship.
Yeah.
Within Leviticus.
There's definitely nothing useful for the modern world.
Right, and like, it's just all about bureaucracy and taxation, and it's ridiculous. Like, there's no justification for it.
Shit that's not even like, that doesn't even really matter.
Yeah.
Like, if you sin, gotta give us a little something. We'll sacrifice it to the big guy, and then you'll be okay.
Because
and
he
we'll
likes
also
the sweet smell.
Yeah, and we'll also get our food.
Yeah.
So it kind of seems like a little bit like a pyramid scheme, doesn't it?
It is a pyramid scheme. I mean, obviously, it all goes up to Aaron at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the big boss.
Yeah,
besides Moses.
Yeah, until he dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What would you rate?
I pretty much have the same thing.
Yeah.
There's really nothing. It's a nothing book right now.
It's a 0 out of 10.
It's just really boring. Nothing exciting in it happens. Some of the laws are just stupid. Maybe I'll give it like a point something because some of the laws are crazy.
Yeah. Okay. It gets like...
It's like, I can pick out one ridiculous thing in there and be entertained.
Yeah,
by
I
that.
guess.
But like most of it is just so dull and just kill a bunch of animals for us, please.
Anyways, the 4th book of Moses is called Numbers.
Yep, Numbers. So Numbers starts off very boring. It basically starts off as a census and kind of splitting up the camps. You kind of like arrange them into their places. The Levites are, because they already built the tabernacle. They have the tabernacle in the middle. The Levites surround that, and then there are camps of each group or of each tribe that goes around that. So basically, the Levites are the bitches of the other groups.
Yeah, but it's okay because they get to be close to God.
Yeah, pretty much. So we start off with the spies story. Now, the spies is one of those... now, I forget the authors of this one, but it's also one of those stories that was kind of mixed together from 2 other ones. But the general story is Moses sends over these spies into Canaan?
Yes, he sends them over so that they can get a lay of the land because they haven't been there for a long time.
Yeah. All right, so after the spies come back, they give their report and whatnot. And then afterwards, we get to a very interesting story about Korah's rebellion, and that is Korah, Dathan, and Abiram.
Abiram, that's right.
Yeah.
And so they aren't faithful to Moses.
Yeah, now this is a story that confuses a lot of people because of the way it's written. It is also one of those stories that has been intertwined by a redactor.
Yeah.
It seems like 2 completely different stories altogether. It features different characters in different places with a general theme that's similar.
Yeah.
So it was confusing people for a long time. And I think that is Numbers 16.
Yes. Numbers... I'm just gonna get here. The rebellion of Korah. The son of Izhar. The son of Kohath. The son of Levi. And Dathan and Abiram. So basically, these people, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, don't like the way things are going. They're not fans of Aaron. They're not big fans of Moses. And they're not big fans of Yahweh. And so Moses is basically like, all right, let's get together in the congregation and let's see what happens. So they get together and there's a fire that God starts and all these people die.
So here's I think this is Numbers 16:31. And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, and they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up." And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense.
Yep.
So a bunch of people die.
There was an earthquake and a fire.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people die, and that was what God saw as appropriate for
To
how
do,
to
yeah.
deal with that situation.
That is how you do that.
Yeah. Now, after this story, we get to getting water from the rock again.
Yes.
There's a different rock this time.
Yep. Different rock. What from looks like a different place. I think this one is in Meribah. Yep.
Yep. And Moses hits the rock. Moses wasn't supposed to hit the rock.
Right. He wasn't. So now, as his punishment for hitting the rock when God told him not to, he doesn't get to go to the promised land.
Right, and that comes up at the end of Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
But he still gets the water. They still get water from the rock. He's just not allowed to enter into the promised land because he lost his temper. So that's a very significant part of it, but it really does just read like a retelling of the same story.
Yeah. Because it's the same general idea.
Yes. So after this we get Balak and Balaam.
Yep. And Balaam's donkey.
Balaam has a donkey, and this donkey goes nuts and runs off, and he's running after him, and then the donkey pleads for his life, and he's like, you're not going to get any mercy from me.
And the donkey is the only one that can see the angel in the road, I think, right?
Right, he couldn't see it originally. I think it reveals itself to him.
No, I mean the donkey saw it.
Yeah, but
then Balaam didn't.
Balaam didn't.
Yeah.
And then Balaam basically gets judged by this angel, and there's not much that comes of it.
It's really not much.
Yeah.
Just some guy who wants Israel to be cursed, I think.
Mm-hmm. There's a guy who wants Israel to be cursed, and Balaam, he participates in...
He just keeps... He doesn't want... He's not doing it. He's not cursing them.
Well, he does it. He does his method of, communicating with God. And God's like, no, I'm not going to do it.
Oh, okay.
So they do this over and over and over and over again. And each time they're like, no, it's just not going to happen. And that's basically all that happens from Balaam. He just tries and fails over and over. It's kind of like a comedy, honestly. The whole Balaam story is kind of like a comedic uplift.
This entire book is just a comedy of God's failures.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he made people and they disobeyed him. He's like, God damn, now I have to kill all you.
Yeah.
And he thought he could help them if he helped Moses, but Moses did something he didn't like. And he was like, fuck you, Moses.
Yeah.
Yeah, just not working for him.
Not working. So after Balaam's story...
The next big thing is the heresy at Peor. They are worshiping Baal, I think.
Oh, they're worshiping Baal.
Yes, another Canaanite god, as was Yahweh. So there's this Baal worship at Peor, and then later, closer to the end of the book, we pretty much get the narrative of the consequences of that worship. Because I believe the Midianites were worshiping other gods, just as they did at Peor.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some women that came in and the guys started worshiping their gods or something. And then they destroy them.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. The people of Moses go in there and kill them all.
Yep. One, for mixing their bloodstream with those filthy foreign women. Though Moses, I believe,
He did have, I think she was also Midianite.
yeah,
Yeah, he had a Midianite wife, I think.
yeah, and apparently she was fine.
Yeah. That's
All that
fine. I mean,
history.
hypocrisy's cool in the Bible.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
And after Peor,
Yeah, after Peor, we get the war against the Midianites.
against the Midianites.
Yeah, and then...
And this is a very, like, ethno-state kind of mentality that's going through this right now. They do not want foreign gods. They do not want foreign women. They don't want any of that foreign shit.
Yeah, and then closer to the end of the book, and it's pretty much the last thing that matters, is they divide their boundary lines.
Mm-hmm.
They figure out what each tribe is going to have.
Yes. And they prepare for the greater war ahead. Right?
Yeah, because that's going to come up, not in Deuteronomy, but it is going to come up in Joshua.
Right. And, I'm going to say Numbers... I'd probably give Numbers a 4 out of 5.
Would you?
Maybe a 3 out of 5.
No, I'll probably give it like a 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
Like, it's not nearly as
It's not as
big
good as Genesis.
it's not as big as Genesis. It's not as elaborate.
But there's some good comedy.
Yeah.
There's some fun stuff that happens. There's some significant actions that have consequences later on in the story.
Yeah. I think if they added a bit more flavor,
Yeah.
it would have been much better read.
Yeah, but it does give, an atheist, attack, right, with the Korah story.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because, of course, we can always reference that even in the Bible, you're just wiping people out left and right. It doesn't matter what they've done previously.
It doesn't.
The second that they turn away from God,
That's when bad things happen.
Yeah, that's when bad things happen.
Sounds like something you might write if your nation was failing.
Yeah, maybe. So that's all for Numbers. Now, what about Deuteronomy?
So Deuteronomy,
The final book.
the final book in the Torah.
It's a speech. Mostly.
It is mostly a speech. It is just Moses talking for a long time. I think there's like a little bit of a break near the end.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts off with a retelling of their wandering, or at this time it would have been a telling of their wandering in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is the first book written.
This is the first book that was written in all of these books.
Yeah.
Right.
At least the core of it. It may have all been completed at the same time, last editions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it was certainly the first book written in the Torah. Because other stuff, there's no exposition in this book.
Right.
It's very basic stuff that they may have had happen in their history, but not nearly to the extent that is described in the other books.
Yeah. And I think, personally, that Deuteronomy is probably the most exciting out of all these books.
I think the only reason it's the most exciting is because of one chapter that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that one, though.
We'll get to that one. So where do we start off in Deuteronomy? It's a speech.
Yep. It's basically Moses telling a short history of what happened.
Yep. And they're rousing the people up for war.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're about to go into war against Canaan.
Yes.
So we have the wandering.
Then the Ten Commandments.
Then we have the Ten Commandments, again, or I should say initially.
Yes.
And then Golden Calf, initially. And then we have a bunch of crazy laws.
Yeah, a bunch of crazy laws.
Yeah, it goes really nuts. One, I can't even, I don't remember most of these. It's just a bunch of crazy laws. Some of them are just legal stuff that really doesn't matter.
Yeah, and also this golden calf story, in fact, most of the stories in here are very minimalistic. They just kind of mention that it happens.
Yeah.
Whereas the golden calf story from Exodus is like a whole huge thing. This one's just like, oh, there's a golden calf.
Yeah.
And then they get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they get into all these commandments. And there are so many commandments in Deuteronomy. And there's stuff about wizards, necromancers, and people who have dream visions, and people who read fortunes. And
And some of my favorite ones here. I do like that this chapter is just called Various Laws.
Yeah.
Because it's just stuff that you can't really put anywhere. You shall make yourself tassels on the four corners of the garment with which you cover yourself. You shall not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed, lest the whole yield be forfeited. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear cloth of wool and linen mixed together. A woman shall not wear a man's garments, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. And then we have here some like marrying female captives. When you go out to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God gives them into your hand, and you take them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire to take her to be your wife, and you bring her home to your house, she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall take off the clothes in which she was captured, and shall remain in your house and lament her father and her mother a full month. After that, you may go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife.
Wow.
But if you no longer delight in her, you shall let her go where she wants. But you shall not sell her for money, nor shall you treat her as a slave, since you have humiliated her.
Wow.
So this starts off not great, and then it says, but don't sell her. Because I know you were thinking about it. Don't.
And there's just so much.
Oh, the rebellious son?
The rebellious son.
You take him and stone them?
Yeah, well, murder. You can kill people for so many reasons.
Yeah.
Like, Deuteronomy just is like, do you want a reason to kill someone? And flip to any random page in Deuteronomy. They're probably guilty of something.
You will find a reason to kill someone.
Yeah, and God is totally okay with it. So, for Deuteronomy, I think it gives atheists the most firepower. Yeah. Because there's so much terrible shit in Deuteronomy.
Now, my favorite that we can go over is Deuteronomy 28.
Deuteronomy 28?
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, you got a surprise for us here.
So remember, it started off with blessings.
Yeah.
But then the end was just curses.
Yes.
You remember those curses? God, if you disobey God, He will make you eat your children, and He will enjoy making you eat your children.
Oh, yeah.
That it says it in there.
Oh, Deuteronomy 28:53, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord hath given thee, in the siege and in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee. And also 55, so that he will not give to any of them the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he hath nothing left him in the siege, and in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in thy gates.
And then at 28:63, and as the Lord took delight in doing you good and multiplying you, so the Lord will take delight in bringing ruin upon you and destroying you, and you shall be plucked off the land that you are entering to take possession of it.
Yeah.
So it's telling you that all these terrible things are going to happen if you don't listen to God, and He will enjoy destroying you.
Yes, He will enjoy destroying you.
That was probably the most intense chapter we have ever read on the show.
It is incredibly intense. And there's also, earlier on, there are more problems that God will bring you. In Leviticus, actually, 26 gives, if you shall despise my statutes, or your soul abhor my judgments, that you don't do my commandments, I will appoint over you terror, consumption, and the burning egg that shall consume thy eyes, and cause sorrow of heart, and you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. So, and then it goes on, I will break the pride of your power, I will make your heaven as iron, and your earth as brass. Your strength shall be spent in vain, your land shall not yield her increase, or the trees of the land yield their fruits. If you walk contrary to me, I will bring 7 times more plagues upon you according to your sins. I will also send wild beasts among you, which shall rob you of your children, and destroy your cattle, and make you few in number, and your highways shall be desolate. Then I will also walk contrary unto you, and will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. And I'll bring a sword upon you, that shall avenge the quarrel of my covenant. I will send pestilence among you, and you will be delivered into the hand of your enemy. And when I have broken the staff of your oven, 10 women shall break your bread in one oven. They shall deliver you your bread again by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied. And it just keeps going on and on and on. Like, God is going to cut you down.
You really just made that reference.
Yeah, I did. But with that being said, that's pretty much everything that we
Except for the death of Moses.
Except for the death of Moses. Now,
Yeah.
Moses goes up onto this mountain like his brother did. And he gets to sit there and look at the land that was promised to him.
But he can't get it.
And then he gets to die.
Only 2 people that were initially promised the land got to actually see it. It was Caleb and Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at this point in the story, we've heard a little bit about Joshua. It goes over at the end of Deuteronomy about how Joshua was supposed to be his successor.
Yeah.
But we have heard almost nothing about Caleb. What we know about Caleb is that he was a good, God-fearing individual.
Yeah, a good God-fearing guy. And after Moses dies, God buries him. And after God buries him, Joshua's in charge.
Yep, and Joshua is going to be a big old warlord.
Yep, and Joshua starts off the book of Joshua, obviously, which is the first book of the books after the Torah. So Deuteronomy was the final book of the Torah. I would probably give it a 4 out of 5. I really liked it. I thought that the laws were ridiculous. The punishments even more so.
You know,
I thought it was cool that they give like a rousing war speech.
Yeah. I think that it starts off really boring, but it ends on clearly a high note.
Yeah.
So I would also agree 4 out of 5
Yeah, 4
for
out of 5.
Deuteronomy.
So, overall, what were your ratings for all of it? I said...
my initial one was 3.5
I was also 3.5.
for Genesis. I'll give, what was it? Exodus. I think we agreed at 2 on that one.
Yeah.
And then for Leviticus, I was going to give that one a 0.5.
0.5 is fair.
Yeah, because it does have some crazy shit in it. Numbers? Did we say 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Deuteronomy just said 4?
Mm-hmm.
So, what's all that? Together, 6, 3, 9, 13 out of
5. Which
5,
is
25.
a little under...
So it's a little over half. It's a little over 2.5.
Yeah, it's a little over 2.5.
Yeah.
So, you'd rate it about there.
Yeah.
I'd also rate it about there. It's not a really fun read. It's not a really useful read. It is kind of horrifying that people actually believe in this.
Yeah, not because of just how crazy it is, but because they call it the good book.
The good book.
This is not a good book.
No, this is not a good book.
It does have some good things.
This book has genocide. This book has rape. This book has war. This book has pestilence. This book has targeted assassinations. This book has unjust taxation. This book, literally anything bad you can think of,
is in this
basically. Down to STDs.
There's a very few number of things, at least in the Torah, that are actually good advice. Like I think in Leviticus and Numbers, maybe Deuteronomy 2, there was like a few good things.
Yeah, and
that
then
were fair and reasonable.
In like Genesis, they talk about planting seeds.
And I think in Numbers, I think with the Zelophehad's daughters, something about treating women at least closer to equal.
Yeah.
About like if there is no son, they should get an inheritance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, all right, great.
That's good.
But let's not overlook the horrendous amount of shit. And it's not just God doing bad things. It's God commanding people to do bad things.
And then punishing him if they don't do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes if they do it.
That too. And it's the Lord's it's God's chosen people doing these things, and God's all like, "Good for you! You killed my enemies."
Yeah, and God will also tell people,
I didn't even ask you that time, and you did it. Thanks, Moses.
And God will also tell people to do things that contradict His own rules.
Yeah.
And He'll do things that contradict His own rules, and there are tons of just outright contradictions between chapters. I mean, even we were reading Deuteronomy, and like within one chapter separation, there were contradictions.
Yeah.
There are apologists out there who say there are no contradictions in the Bible.
And they try to make up for all of them, and it's like, you can't really.
You can't. When in one chapter they say something else, and in another chapter they say something else.
The direct opposite.
And you remember that one thing that we ran into where every single one of our translations had a different...
That's right, they all had
it was literally like a Trump moment. Like, all of them said should, and one of them said shouldn't, and another one said shouldn't.
That was...
Or something.
Yes, that was at the end of Deuteronomy.
Yeah. Yeah, so Genesis chapter 33:6 says, "Let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few."
But mine says, "Let Reuben live and not die, but let his men be few."
And this one says, if I can just get to the right page here.
Yeah, I'll read from this one, Deuteronomy 33:6.
All right.
This is the New King James.
33:6. "Let Reuben live and not die, in that his men become few."
And let Reuben live and not die, nor let his men be few.
So that could mean anything.
we just don't know that one.
Yeah.
That one's very shady. We don't know if he wants the people of, what is it, Reuben?
Yeah, Reuben's descendants.
Yeah, he doesn't know if he wants them to be few or not.
No.
So
between translations.
Yeah.
And like other people will say, of course, "Oh, King James only," right? Which is just ridiculous.
No, the King James is based on late manuscripts,
Yes.
like 9th century at the earliest.
The Masoretic text based on late manuscripts.
Yeah, it's really between the Masoretic texts and then like we have the text at Qumran and I forget the names of the other ones, but it's the Septuagint we use.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also not the first one because the first one was Hebrew, obviously. Mm-hmm. But it's really, it's hard to figure out what the original was. Like, there is no such, like, when people say that the Bible isn't flawed, and when you point out the errors, they're like, "Oh, but the original one wasn't flawed." And I'm like, "But you don't even know what the original one is. We have no originals. Like, how do you know what it says?"
Yeah.
Like, but either way. So...
Would you recommend reading the Torah?
I would recommend reading parts of it, but certainly not the whole thing. It took us a year.
It took us a year.
And we gave it a fucking 2.5 out of 5.
A 50%. That's not a passing grade.
It's a tiny little bit over 50%. What is it, like 52? No, it would be 54%.
This is like literally on a true-false question, just filling in true for every answer. Like, that would result in the same level of adequacy that the Torah has.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Margin of error.
It's not good. It inspires interesting traditions, but I would not say it inspires good traditions. And obviously there's also moments here or there where they specifically point out basically that this is a subset of Canaanite religion, with using the same god names, talking about other gods, using plurals for gods.
Yeah, they use many different names for gods. Let's go down the list. We have El, Elohim, Yahweh, Adonai, Shaddai.
Yeah, Shaddai.
What was the other one you just said?
It was like Sabaoth or something.
Okay.
There was a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
tons of them. And the the Kabbalistic tradition has one that's 42 letters long. Why?
Why? That's too long.
It's bad. But that's our thoughts on the Torah.
That's our thoughts on the Torah.
Not a fun book, not a good book, definitely not the good book.
Not even close.
We're gonna be in Atheist Sunday School covering the prophets now that we're through with the Torah, and we will bring you a review of the prophets as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably, I hope, a little more fun.
I don't know if it'll be more fun, but it'll definitely be new. It'll be a new kind of genre.
A new genre, with
Yeah.
new authors.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, if you enjoy our review of this book, you should definitely leave a comment, especially if you want to see book reviews in the future. And if you really enjoyed us, like, subscribe, Teespring, Patreon. We got tons of rewards. We got all sorts of goodies out there.
MilwaukeeAtheist.com.
MilwaukeeAtheist.com. We got a forum. All sorts of good stuff. Come visit us on Sundays at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we'll read the Bible with you.
We'll have a good time.
Yep. That's all.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.